In the years before the Russian Revolution exploded in 1917, political opposition was stamped on. Outspoken radicals were either shot, imprisoned, or exiled. But there was one voice in Russia, a furious critic of the evil and injustice of the Tsarist state, who was never silenced. Lev Nikolaevich Tolstoy. Why did Tolstoy, a hugely successful novelist, assume this provocative role? Why did he become such a thorn in the side of Imperial Russia? Perhaps there's a clue in his childhood.
It was my brother Nikolenka who announced to us that he possessed a secret by means of which, when it was disclosed, all men would become happy. There'd be no diseases, no troubles. No one would be angry with anyone. All would love each other. This secret, as he told us, was written by him on a green stick, which he'd buried by the road on the edge of a certain ravine.
This utopian story captivated Tolstoy as a child and haunted him for the rest of his life. By the time he was 40, Tolstoy had written one of the greatest novels of all time. But during his next 40 years, it wasn't literature that preoccupied him, but a relentless, ruthless, all-consuming desire to discover what was written on the little green stick. By the beginning of the 1870s, thanks to War and Peace, Tolstoy was established as Russia's greatest living writer. He was fast becoming a wealthy man. Life was good. He was in love with his wife, he already had 4 children, and there was another on the way. Yet strangely, he was ill at ease with himself, with who he was, and the way he lived. This landowning aristocrat was beginning to ask fundamental questions about the stark inequality of Russian society, the poverty of the vast peasant underclass, and the iron rule of the imperial regime. In 1871, he decided to make the long journey across Russia and down the great Volga River to the eastern region of Samara and the empty wilderness of the Russian steppe beyond. Why did Tolstoy come here?
Tolstoy loved the steppe, this enormous expanse, and the people who had not been spoilt by serfdom. There were no serfs here. All the peasants here were tenants in their own right. Tolstoy grew up in a rural village. He knew peasants and he sympathized with them. He was always concerned for them.
Tolstoy fell in love with the land and with the people of Samara. And despite Sophia's reservations, he decided to buy a large plot. And in the summer of 1873, he insisted on bringing the whole of his family with an entourage of servants here for their annual summer holiday. This bedstead memorial marks the place where their simple farmhouse stood. This place became his retreat, his inspiration, and you can see just why he was so captivated by it. This country, he said, is beautiful. It is just emerging from its virginity. Sight of the farm, Victor, our guide, arranged a typical Bashkiri feast of lamb and fermented horse milk. This is the famous kumis. This is the mare's milk that was drunk by Tolstoy. In fact, he came here in pursuit of this particular beverage, actually.
Tolstoy очень любил кумыс.
Yeah.
Cheers. Cheers.
I really have. Look, I've really drunk it. This is not pretending.
This is like something in the Arab world, they call it laban.
That's yogurt, which is fermented yogurt, the same, but not normal. This is really just milk. This is like milk, but it is fermented. It tastes very fizzy and rather sour. I don't know if it's to everyone's taste, but I've got this in common with Tolstoy. I like this.
The first summer that Tolstoy brought the family here was especially hot and dry. In fact, the region was in the grip of a terrible drought and famine.
Lev Tolstoy wrote a letter from his farm here to his publishers about the famine in Samara, which was published in the main Moscow newspaper. Because of that letter, all of Russia and the entire world was alerted to the famine in the Samara region.
He was single-handedly responsible for famine relief. The state realized it should do something, but it was so inefficient. I mean, apart from anything else, it was so bloody inefficient, the Tsarist regime. Tolstoy, who was a good landowner, good army officer, he went to Samara and he actually made sure that the food got to the people who needed it. He raised money. He wrote letters to the English papers and alerted the world to the famine in Russia.
This simple wooden cross on this remote highway is a modest memorial to the thousands who died in the terrible famines of the 1870s and 80s. For Tolstoy, the steppe of Samara was both a refuge and a revelation, an escape from his formal life, his life as a writer and landowner, into a world in which the authority of church, government, and social hierarchy were just words in the wind. At first glance, it might seem hard to see the link between the moral, political, and religious tumult bubbling in Tolstoy's mind and the romantic novel that he was beginning to compose that summer in Samara. As much as anything he wrote, Tolstoy's masterpiece, Anna Karenina, is a profoundly autobiographical work, and even the introspective, tragic heroine shares a great deal with her creator.
Narrate contour.
At the beginning of Anna Karenina, Anna, the wife of a St. Petersburg civil servant, travels to Moscow to visit her brother and his family. Unexpectedly, she encounters a young cavalry officer called Vronsky, first at the train station and then at a ball. On the way home, on the train, she tries to read a novel, a romantic English novel, to distract herself from a growing sense of guilt. But in some way, she has behaved improperly with this man. Anna read attentively, but there was no pleasure in reading, no pleasure in entering into other people's lives and adventures. She was too eager to live herself.
Tolstoy was like Anna. He was reluctant to commit to fantasy. He was too involved with real life. As he began to write this story, the characters and events that emerged began to bear a striking resemblance to the people, events, and conflicts in his own life. If War and Peace was a book about who Tolstoy was, perhaps Anna Karenina was a book about who Tolstoy had become.
Tolstoy'un Hayatı.
I've always believed there is a bigger difference between War and Peace and Anna Karenina than has generally been acknowledged. Think of the beginning of Anna Karenina, the epigraph. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord, I will repay. Vengeance is there at the beginning. Suicide is there at the end. And we know, in biographical terms, that Tolstoy got the idea from the sad fate of a poor woman who threw herself under a train not too far from Yasnaya Polyana. And he was taken in as the local JP, and he had to view the mangled corpse there in the mortuary and be there while they carried out the post-mortem. And it stuck in his mind. There is a darker tone about Anna Karenina. There is more violence, there is more pessimism. It's not the sunny uplands that, that happened at the end of War and Peace.
Anna Karenina intertwines the unfolding tragedy of Anna and her lover Vronsky with a second troubled romance between the young Kitty Shabansky